Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. As part of our how-to series, we're going to look at how to make the decision to get better and really mean it. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and I'll get back to you personally. Most people don't realize it, even people who know about mind-body issues, but there is a component to getting better that is about deciding certain things to get better. It's not as simple as you can decide to get better or not, or if you're not getting better, you haven't decided to get better, or if you did get better, you did make the decision. It's not like that, but there are ways in which you can use deciding something to get better. Now, earlier in the week, I talked about black and white thinking. That's part of this process, and I will show you at the end of this video how it applies. But first, I want to talk about getting better and why there is a decision involved. It's a very subtle decision that you may not you probably aren't aware of. That's why I'm bringing up this video. So let's talk about the factors that go into getting better. First and foremost, when it comes to mind-body thinking, we need the right understanding. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about a diagnosis. I'm talking about a conceptualization, a way of understanding what's happening. Only through understanding what's happening to you can you get to a point where you can start to get better. You need the right information. You need the right help, and you need the right resources. These are all things that factor into it. You may need a lot of support. You might need reassurance. Feeling loved is a major factor in feeling better. These are all things that are important. I have found that I'm not willing to go to a therapist anymore who's not trauma-informed. You may need a trauma-informed therapist because if they're not, they might reenact that trauma. I've not only have I seen it happen, I've lived it. Only in one case, maybe two, has that happened to me. But you need these things. You might need it to be the right timing. You also can get better if there's less judgment towards yourself or a good core narrative. Last week we talked about the core narrative, how to develop it. That's a way of understanding yourself in a more elemental, central way, making a decision about how, speaking of making a decision about how you're going to go about that. But that's about accepting that trauma and understanding. You're also going to need a good, flexible, and specific plan. And one of the reasons I like the way that I work with these things is it's flexible. It is based in understanding how your mind works, which is, whether you're working with me or not, something you're going to need to understand. How is my mind thinking about this? How am I interfacing with the emotions? What's going on with my doubts? Am I feeling powerful? You need to check in and find out how you are. But we must not, when we're trying to get better, leave out that we need the right mindset. I'm not saying that judgmentally of anybody who's struggling to get better. I'm not telling you you have the wrong mindset. What I'm telling you now is that there is a way to get to the right mindset that hasn't been articulated, at least not in the readings that I've done or in talking to people, and that's one of the reasons I'm bringing it up here. So here's the thing. You can't always decide things about your getting better. In fact, you can't always decide things about lots of things in life, but you need to factor it into your considerations when it comes to getting better because, like doubt, it is very insidious how it slides out of the picture and you don't realize it's going on. Here's another way of saying that. From an unconscious standpoint, sometimes we start to doubt things without realizing it. The same is true with decisions. Sometimes we aren't deciding something. We have subtly or unconsciously decided not to decide. And that's one of the things that leaves us stuck in the same place. So what am I talking about? You may be wondering. I bet some of you are. What might you have to decide? Let's talk about the things that you might have to decide. I'm going to list a bunch of different things. This is not an exclusive or full list. There can be many, many more of these. In fact, there are. But here's some examples so that you can get a sense of it. You might have to decide you're going to work harder moment to moment. Because this reminds me a little bit of meditation. I start meditating and I'm like, wow, this really works. I feel better. And then I start to just trail off. I can't keep up the effort. Well, I haven't decided to keep up the effort. If I decide that I am going to commit to that and really do it, I'll have a much easier time doing it. The same is true when you're working with symptoms. You might not realize it, but you might not have actually yet decided, even if you're working really hard at it and you're reading things all the time and you're just working ferociously at it, in a moment-to-moment sort of way, you may not be working hard enough. And the opposite is true. You may have to decide you're going to work less hard on things that aren't working. I was recently interacting with somebody who I'm working with, and she said, right after the session we met, she said, I started watching one of your podcasts and I started to get a headache. And I was like, oh boy, that's not what I wanted in these podcasts. But what I realized is this is one of those examples where that person at that time needed to work less hard. Sometimes you haven't decided to be able to give yourself a break sometimes. I've seen that many times as well. You may have to decide that you're going to start trusting your mind more. That's another very subtle thing that you may not have decided to do. You might be thinking, oh, I trust my mind. Take a second look at all of these things. It's just like doubt. There are times where you think it's one thing, but if you look closely at it, something else is going on underneath. You may have to decide you're going to start trusting your mind more. You may have to decide that now is the time to let yourself do the powerful things. You would be surprised, many of you, how many times I hear people say, oh, yes, no, I want to be powerful. And I'm like, okay, well, what about now? And they're like, oh, well, yes, but it's so hard right now. I don't mean to come across as if I'm saying excuses are being made because it's not conscious. But there is an unconscious element to which a decision has not been made. You are going to need to make a conscious decision about these things. Some of them will apply to you and some won't. But the ones that do apply, you need to focus in on the fact that you can make a conscious decision. Here's another thing you may have to decide. You may have to decide to alter some things in your life externally. Where you work, what you do, where you live, who you're with. I'm not advocating for these as a rule of thumb, by the way. Most of the time, it does not require an external change. But if it's a truly toxic person or a truly toxic work environment, or it just has never been what you wanted to do, you might need to look at that and you might need to make the brave decision. It might be time to clean house from people who have been abusive to you or don't do much good in your life or make it hard for you. Or it might be time to make a change. And you have to decide that before you even do it. You may also have to decide to make new rules for yourself. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of those. I think I've talked about this before in one of my podcasts, but I can't remember because I do a lot of talking these days. But I made up a New Year's resolution for myself. It was in 2002 when that year began. And I realized I had not decided to give good things to myself. I hadn't. I mean, it's not that I never gave anything to myself, but my usual rule of thumb was, no, I shouldn't give myself that. I decided in that year, every single day, I was going to give myself something that I wouldn't have normally. Now, I'm not talking about gifts, maybe, but mostly just experiences or different things. That is an example of a decision I made. I also made some changes in relation to some toxic people in my life about I can't have them in my life that way. I need to alter the boundaries. I need to do it differently. But I had to decide to do it. You may also have to decide, speaking of mind-body symptoms and how this works, you may have to decide which mind-body ideas make sense to you and which don't, or which practitioners are worth listening to. They all mean well. We all mean well. And I'm not even saying necessarily to listen to me, although in this case I would, because I'm trying to get this message across. There may be parts of what I say or what somebody else say that don't fit as much with what you think and what you need. You have to make a decision so that it's not just a mess of opinions, because that gets very confusing. You get to decide to have some direction about it. You might have to decide to give up a certain stance that's getting in the way, and sometimes you don't even realize what that is. Or you may have to recognize that you're ambivalent about deciding anything. I often hear people say, yeah, but. Now, we all say, yeah, but. And it makes a lot of sense that we might say that because there is nuance. But earlier in the week, I talked about black and white thinking, and I want to revisit that now because, yeah, but tends to relate to shades of gray thinking. But wait a minute, there's this other side. Yes, that's true. But, speaking of but, there can also, when people use that phrase, my ears prick up because I also hear it potentially as a sign that you're not making the full decision that you need to get better in that area. Instead, you're choosing to argue the other side. I'm not saying it's bad, but you want to check in with yourself about it, because sometimes "yeah, but" is a sign that you're not ready to make that decision, or you're not making it anyway, and often in a very subtle way. So let's talk about what this deciding to get better actually looks like. I gave some examples of what you might need to decide, but I want to get more specific about the action steps that I recommend in relation to that, if that is the problem. And sometimes it is. I didn't have that problem as much because I had actually solved that problem in an earlier iteration of my own problems before I even had major mind-body symptoms, although I've had mind-body symptoms my whole life because it's the human condition, and I especially have a lot of it. But here's what we're talking about. Most of all, the way that getting better is a decision is in learning to empathize with you. Truly empathize with you. And this is what the core narrative is about. It is about telling yourself a story where you are the central character and you're a positive character. And you like the way you are. And you value even your trauma because it made you who you are and it makes you powerful. You're going to need to, at some point, make the decision to see yourself as the hero of your own story. That's a part of how you have to get better. Getting better is also a decision to be in your own corner. Same thing, but I use the phrase being fiercely in your own corner. That doesn't mean, again, that you act out against other people, but within yourself, you're at the center. How am I feeling about this? Is it okay with me? And your body will often tell you if it's not. It's a decision to stop criticizing yourself. We criticize ourselves all the time, and a lot of times in very subtle ways that we're not realizing. It's a decision to see yourself not as the cause of the pain, but the solution. That's another statement that I make a lot. If you don't make that decision, you can get stuck in a loop with yourself where you say, well, listen, I want to get better, but every time I think about this as a mind-body symptom, I feel bad because I'm the cause. Well, first of all, no, you're not. And secondly, you've got to decide that. You got to decide it once and for all. It's a decision to let yourself be powerful. It's a decision to let things change. Every action step is actually a decision to live differently in some way or to think differently. It's to give yourself something new. But there is a component. Again, I'm not saying this is the only thing to it, and there's a lot to let yourself get to that point. But you've got to be aware you're always going to need to make that decision. So being certain has many parts to it, because being certain is a decision also. Science, logic, results, proof, the ability to calm your mind's worries, the ability to unearth your questions, the resources you need, the expertise to get the help you need. All of these things lend themselves to certainty, but being certain also involves a decision to let in some black and white thinking, like I talked about earlier in the week, and finally let some things come to rest. If you are always wondering about them and you can't put it to rest, it's very hard to get the relief you need. We can actually decide at a certain point to be certain because we've seen, heard, or felt enough. You just may not need that much more. Now, I say very often that when people are 99% sure, that means they're 1% not sure, and that 1% can be very powerful. And this is true. But when it's time to make a decision, you might say, you know what, 99% is good enough for me to believe 100%. I don't need to see more. That's the distinction. Maybe you didn't get to 100% in the total proof sort of way, but you're like, that 99% I'll take. Not the one that the doctor said, because I'm not sure. I'm just taking it from them. Ultimately, getting better does involve a decision to trust the process of your brain. It's to trust in things like evolution, that the mind and the body are strong and adaptable, and they heal and they grow. And it may even be a decision to let things flow right where they need to go. That's something that took me a long time to learn. I felt like I was always trying to put things to rest, but I was thinking, but should it go this way or should it go this way? Learning to trust your own mind and to trust the process and let it flow, that's what you need to do. Then things start to move along. So let's sum this up a little bit. When you are making a decision to get better, first of all, you may not have been aware that you weren't making a decision to get better. So nobody's at fault for that. But I just wanted to highlight that this is something you need to be able to do. Just to consider, am I maybe not making a decision here? Sometimes that's why people get stuck. Ultimately, getting better is at least a decision to hear the message of your body and take it at its word. There's a lot of decisions to be made in here, and I'm not telling you you've got to make them now. You've got to decide when you're ready, and you may need more information, or you may need more support. There's all kinds of things that go into making a decision. I just want to highlight that question's actually out there. A lot of times people don't realize it. So remember to factor in that part of getting better is actually a decision. So I hope you did find this helpful, but I look forward to hearing your comments. I'd be happy to answer them directly below. I do answer them directly, as people have seen. And if you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and hit like if you like what you're hearing. It helps me to know what's working for you guys and what isn't. In any case, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.